you've been in the business more than 20 minutes. It's implied this thing of, well, you got to have discipline. But geez, you got to have discipline. Discipline. You got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and you got to do the things that other people aren't willing to do, and you got to fight, fight, fight. You got to get in there. Well, you gotta. And oh my God, it just makes my head spin. This segment is all about discipline. Hey, it only goes so far. Okay, I'm not telling you that you don't need to be disciplined. I think you do need to be disciplined. I do think you need to wake up at a reasonable time. I think you have to have core working hours. I do think that you need to time block your activities and all these things. I think that if you're doing this stuff above average most of the time, then you're going to get an above average result most of the time. But what I would like to caution you on is the fact that discipline only takes you so far. And believe you me, this is coming from a former Marine that's going to tell you that I don't care how strong you are and I don't care how many pull-ups you can do. If you're storming the beaches of Normandy and you get shot in the head, it's not because of a lack of discipline. It's just because you lost. And so I want you to start adopting a slightly different mindset. And that is, think of discipline as a tool or maybe as like a muscle, right? So discipline is something that you need to practice, and the more you practice it, the better it gets. But there's going to be a failure rate on how big that muscle is going to get and how important it is and how big of a role it's going to play in your success. What I want you to do, in addition to having some disciplined habits, and that is, hey, one donut's fine, but the box of donuts is probably not so good. Here's what's going to help you enhance your discipline, and that is system and process. What you have to do is you really have to find a process and a system where you can showcase your discipline. And so the perfect example is, well, you got to get up every day and be disciplined and make those cold calls, and you got to be setting appointments, and you got to do that thing, right? Do that thing. And so all that power and all that energy and all that emotion is being poured out into a wasteland because you don't really know what to do next. And so if you're not really clear on when you're going to sit down and when you are going to make cold calls, that, hey, here's the list of people I'm going to call and here's what I'm going to say. If you're not really clear on that, then you can have the best intention in the world and you can be the most disciplined person in the world. Well, I did it. I'm going to stop. I'm going to do it. But your effectiveness is going to be really low. And when your effectiveness gets lower and lower, what will happen is that means the discipline has to ratchet up higher and higher. And you're going to meet a failure rate on the discipline because you need to set yourself up for success in anything that you think that you need to be doing on a regular basis. Your discipline could possibly fail. However, you're going to be able to enhance the strength of your discipline and your conviction by saying, I am going to make cold calls. I'm going to do it on Tuesday at 3 o'clock. I'm going to do it between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock. And who I'm going to call is a list of all my past clients. I have them in alphabetical order. And I'm going to start, boom, I'm going to start making these calls. Now, you can even set a little goal for yourself and say, gosh, I would like to make at least 50 calls or at least 20 calls or whatever the number is. The goal setting part is about having a system and a process. The discipline is about just initiating the action. Real discipline is about initiating the action. And then the other part of discipline is remaining sustainable in that activity. And I know that those two concepts seem pretty obvious, but are they? But let's just dissect them. Let's do the antithesis of who we'd perceive to be somebody who's got bad discipline, right? So what are the two factors? He doesn't start. And he doesn't finish. He doesn't start or finish. Well, that person's just lazy, right? And so you start getting branded with lazy because you're not sustainable in your effort. Or you get branded as, that person just doesn't take a lot of initiative, right? Well, they don't take much initiative and they don't seem to complete what they finish. Oh my goodness. Could you imagine if those two things applied to you in the real estate industry? So it doesn't mean other people are saying those things to you. But what I'm really concerned about, what I like to focus on is, are you saying those two things to yourself? Do you have a fear of starting? And when you do start something, do you have perseverance? Can you persevere through kind of the bumps? You're making these cold calls and someone says, I'm sorry, who is this? Well, Jim, I sold you a house last year. It's Don Stanek. Do you remember me? No, I don't really remember you. Now, I could hang up the phone and then I could quit because I'm like, oh my gosh, all this effort and nobody remembers who I am. No, because this is where the discipline kicks in. The discipline is getting to that next place, right? But without the system and the process, I may be overwhelmed. I didn't have a good phone call, but I already have another person that I'm going to call right behind that. If I didn't have another person that I was going to call, if I just out of the blue thought, all right, I'm just going to call Jim. Oh, yeah, Jim bought a house from me last year. I'll call Jim. That'll be an easy call. Totally easy call because he likes me. He likes me. Get on the phone with Jim, doesn't remember you. Discouragement sets in. Discipline has to kick up for you to dial the phone again. Discouragement sets in, right? If you get discouraged 3 or 4 or 5 times in a row, are you going to persevere past that point? Well, maybe you are and maybe you aren't. But I will tell you, the people who find great focus in terms of system and process and discipline are those who approach this with probably more of an administrative mindset. So what you need to do is let go of some of the emotion. It's not about winning and losing. Oh, I'm winning. I'm winning. And I know that's difficult because a lot of sales professionals, myself included, they feel like they want to win. Well, hey, it feels good, right? Because I'm competitive. I won. I'm competitive. I won. But you're never really competing against anybody else. Let's be honest. You're always competing against your own ability to start something and then to maintain it all the way through to a termination point. The real competition isn't happening outside of you. The real competition is happening inside your head. Okay, and now the final part of discipline only goes so far. My goodness, you got system and process, you got a method, and that's going to help you build that muscle, that framework muscle around discipline. And the last part of this equation is you have to involve other people in your business. You have to involve other people in your success. You have to involve other people in your prospecting. You have to involve other people in all the processes, all the systems, and all the methods that you have in play in your business. When you include other people, all of a sudden, it's much easier to get out of your own head. It's much easier for you to hold somebody else accountable to doing some of the things that you don't necessarily want to do, right? So you have to have a skill set where you can do the thing that you don't want to do, or what I highly recommend is if you can have somebody else do that for half of what your hourly rate is, for gosh sakes, you better outsource it. But now your skill set's going to shift. You have a discipline of not just doing it yourself. You're going to have the discipline of following up with a subordinate, a team member, a vendor, or somebody else to ensure that that person is complying with some basic performance standards that you've set out for them. Does this still take discipline? It does, but what's nice about this is the skill set of following up with a subordinate or someone you're delegating to is you already have positional authority, and this conversation's not happening in your own head, for gosh sakes. What's happening is I know someone else, I told them to do something, and now I want to see if they've done it, and that conversation is 10 times easier than asking yourself the question, man, have I done that? Do I really want to do it? Maybe I'll put in a load of laundry, right? Because self-exploration is about interpersonal growth, and sometimes we can kind of point to someone else and tell them to get that thing done. Now, ultimately, it's all a measure of your own personal and interpersonal growth, because pointing to someone else and delegating is a skill set. It's something you have to learn. And then the whole follow-up process around guaranteed performance standard is yet another skill set. But those skill sets are actually pretty easy, and I can walk you through those. It's not going to take much for me to be able to do that. 9 times out of 10, if you have a partner or a subordinate who's underperforming, it really kind of boils down to the expectation wasn't very clear, or the system and the process wasn't clear enough. So when they did sit down to do the thing that you wanted them to do, they were confused. And this is the same reason that maybe you were initially confused when you sat down to do that activity for yourself. You had to really walk through, I don't want to have to reinvent the wheel every time I do cold calling. I should probably have a simple process. And then you kind of fell into that process by default. But then eventually maybe you got with a coach or a mentor or your branch manager, and then maybe you started to refine that process and get better and better at it. Okay, great. document that, hand it off to a subordinate. That's the key to being able to hand something off, is you have to physically be able to tell them what to do and what the performance expectation is. Your ability to follow up with that one person might be 10 times easier than the 50 or 100 people that you told those people, your subordinate, to follow up with, right? So this is how you increase the efficiency. And then also what happens is when you start delegating to somebody else, you have a built-in accountability partner, because now, because you have positional authority and this person presumably is going to report to you on this task, it makes it 10 times easier for you to actually get the task done, because the labor, right? You don't have to deal with the labor. All you're dealing with is one conversation that's multiplying into 100 or what other tasks they've been assigned to. I know we covered a lot in this segment, and my commitment to you is always the same. If you have questions about getting started, if you have questions about your sustainable effort level, system, process, or even delegation, I'm here for you. I'd be excited to know a little bit more about your business, and I look forward to helping you in any way that I can. Please go grab 15 minutes on my calendar. Let's connect soon.